Deputy Kayakamanu, would you please state your name and spell your name for the record?
Helena Kayakamanu, HELENA
Thank you. Where are you currently employed?
City of St. Anthony Police Department.
And what is your current title or position?
Patrol officer.
How long have you been employed with them?
Just over 1 year.
What, or where, rather, was your previous employment?
Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
And what did you do in working for Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
I was a dispatcher supervisor.
How long did you work as a dispatcher for the Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
Approximately 2.5 years.
And do you have any specialized training in order to be a dispatcher?
You go through an FTO program, training how to dispatch, and then you're sent to a post academy, which certifies you with the state of Idaho.
What are some of your duties as a dispatcher?
We take administrative phone calls. We also take 911 calls and dispatch those 911 calls for police, fire, and EMS.
Okay, so you mentioned as part of your duties that you received 911 calls, is that right?
Yes.
Do you know if those calls are recorded?
Yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, are they stored somewhere?
Yes.
Are you able to access those calls at a later date?
Yes.
Can you alter a call once it has been recorded and stored on the system?
No.
Were you working on October 9th, 2019?
Yes.
And do you recall receiving a couple calls that night about an attempted shooting with a paintball gun?
Yes.
Do you recall the name given by the first individual who placed the call?
Yes.
Who was that?
Joseph Murray.
And the second call that night, who was that?
Tammy Daybell.
Do you have a recollection of when the first call came in approximately?
I want to say about 9:30, 9:45. It was close towards the end of my shift.
Okay. And do you recall about how much later the second call came in?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Did you know Tamara Daybell?
Not personally. I knew that she was the librarian at my children's school.
Okay. Had you heard her name before that night?
Just other than her being the librarian at my children's school, no.
Okay. And so at that point, did you hear her name in the context of any investigation?
Not till later.
Okay. So later on, did you hear her name in the context of an investigation?
Yes.
Regarding the phone calls from October 9th, do you know if those two calls were recorded?
Yes, they were.
And with regard to the first call, have you been able to review a copy of that recording prior to today?
Yes.
And was that recording, to the best of your knowledge, a true and accurate recording of the call that you took that day?
Yes.
Was it the full recording to the best of your knowledge and recollection?
Yes.
If I started playing an audio recording, do you believe that you could recognize if it is your voice?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I have some jump drives with what's been marked as States Exhibit 232A and 232B. If defense counsel, I have shown them previously, but if they want to look at them. And Your Honor, I would like to be able to play the initial part of the recording to be able to have her authenticate her voice and then move for its admission at that point, if that's possible.
All right. Seems like a logical approach. Any objection to that from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Go ahead and begin the playing to authenticate, if you would.
just want to make sure I have my volume up. All right. So, Your Honor, just for the record, I am about to play what's been marked as State's Exhibit 232A.
Okay.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 41 minutes, 57 seconds.
What's your emergency?
Yeah, so my...
And Deputy, were you able to recognize your voice on that first part of that call?
Yes.
Is this the same recording or the start of the same recording that you had previously reviewed?
Yes.
And is it true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and recollection?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admission of State's Exhibit 232A and to be able to publish the full recording.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Exhibit 232A is admitted and may be published to the jury.
And is the sound coming through? It seems like it's just coming through my computer. Is it coming through the rest of the speakers? It's just as loud as my computer is? Okay.
Might want to move the microphone by that speaker.
Mother-in-law, what I just got home about 10 minutes ago, was unloading her car, and she thinks the man, but she's not 100% sure she can see, because they were wearing a ski mask, came up to her with a paintball gun, but they sort of screamed at her, wasn't loaded, so you couldn't, she came out of it. But, she kept asking what he was doing. He would respond, and then suddenly, after she pulled out her husband's hair, he ran off.
Okay, what's the address? Are you there? Hello? Are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you. What's the address?
It's 199 North, 1900 East, Rexburg, Idaho, 83440. That's my address. She lives in the corner. I don't know what her address is.
Okay, I need her address. What's her location?
I think it's 201, I think is her address.
201 North 1900 East?
North, yep.
Does she know which direction he ended up running?
He headed east, back behind their house.
Okay, and did she give you a description of the clothing?
I didn't get one from her. I just only got,
And what is your name?
my name is Joseph Murray.
Okay, is this a good good phone number for you?
Yep.
Okay, I am sending a deputy out to your mother's home.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And after listening to that full recording, Deputy, is that a true and accurate recording of the full call from that night?
Yes.
And I think that we mentioned earlier that there was a second call that you received that night. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you have a chance to review that second call prior to coming to court today?
Yes.
And from your review of that recording, was it true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
And was it a complete recording to the best of your recollection?
Yes.
And again, if I were to begin playing that, do you think you would recognize your voice on that audio?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to play the initial portion of what's been marked as State's Exhibit 232B.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can do so.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 49 minutes, 20 seconds.
Fremont County Sheriff's Office. Hi, I need to report something. Okay, go ahead. What's the address? Okay, at 202 North, 1900 East.
Sorry, this is a little awkward. And Debbie, do you recognize your voice on the beginning of that recording?
Yes.
And does that appear to be a true and accurate depiction of the other or the second 911 call you received on October 9th, 2019?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admission of State's Exhibit 232B and to be able to publish the full recording.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
With no objection, Exhibit 232B is now admitted and may be published in its entirety.
Thank you.
The corner with the blinking yellow light on Salem Highway. Is it a suspicious person? Yes. Okay, what was he wearing? He was all dressed in black and he had a ski mask on. And he said the blinking light now is where you saw him? No, he's gone now because I pulled up into our driveway and I didn't step out of the back seat of my car, and suddenly he was there, and he had a paintball gun, and he was shooting, and like he was going to shoot at me. And I kept asking him what he was doing because I could tell it was a paintball thing. Okay. And then he just kept doing it, so I yelled for my husband, and then he took off running around the back of my house. Okay, give me just 1 minute. Stay on the line with me. Okay.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 50 minutes, 28 seconds.
That was North 1900 East? Yes.
October 9, 2019, 21 hours, 50 minutes, 43 seconds.
Do you know what direction he was going? He went behind my house, and it's so dark out here, and I just went in the house and got my husband and son, and then they went out and looked, and he was long gone by then. So he was on the north side of my house, is where he went to get away. Okay. He didn't say anything, or he just kept like he was holding the gun like he was, had a rifle and just shooting at me, so. But nothing came out of the gun either, so I don't think it was loaded. Okay, and what is your name, ma'am? My name is Tammy Daybell. Okay, I will pass your information on to my deputies. We actually just had a previous call about this individual, so they're out in the area looking now. Okay, yeah, I think it was my son-in-law who lives diagonal from us that called you guys already. Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure it got reported. So. Let's see. And what's your son-in-law's name? Joseph Murray. Okay, yep, it was him. Okay. So, all right, I have a deputy that will be out at your home here shortly. Okay, thank you. Yep.
And Deputy, does that appear to be a true and accurate depiction of the full recording from the second call on October 9th, 2019?
Yes.
Your Honor, just one moment.
Yes.
I can hand the exhibits to the deputy, and I don't have any other questions for this witness.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rawlings.
Thank you.
Is there any cross-examination?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. That'll conclude the testimony of this witness then. Is the witness allowed to be released?
No objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. You can be released. Thank you for your testimony this morning. All right. The state can call its next witness.
And, Your Honor, I may need just a brief recess,
Okay.
and we'll get the next witness here.
Let me have a quick sidebar with counsel.
And the state will next call Christine West. I believe they are bringing her in.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Blake. All right, now that the witness is sworn, I just have a few questions. Have you listened to any of the trial testimony, either in court here at one of the simulcast locations, or listened to it online or anywhere else?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you for that response. Please make verbal responses to any question you're asked, and try to avoid talking at the same time as any attorney questioning you, so we can keep a clear record. Talk right into that microphone, and with all that in mind, Ms. Blake, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Christina West, Christiane West.
Were you employed with the Fremont County Sheriff's Office in 2019?
Yes.
What was your title or position?
I was a dispatcher.
As part of your duties as a dispatcher, do you receive 911 calls?
Yes.
Do you know if those calls are stored somewhere?
Yes, they are.
And I guess I should ask, are they recorded?
Yes.
And then they're stored somewhere?
Yes.
Are you able to access those calls once they're stored?
Yes.
Can you alter a call after it has been recorded and stored?
No.
Do you recall if you were working on October 19th of 2019?
Yes, I was.
What shift were you working?
The morning shift.
Do you recall receiving a call about a deceased individual?
I do.
Who was that call regarding?
Tammy Daybell.
Had you heard Tammy's name prior to that date?
No.
If I were to play the start of an audio recording that's purported to be a copy of that 911 call, do you believe you would be able to recognize your voice on there?
Yes, I would.
And just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I had the right exhibit number. Your Honor, this has previously been provided to defense counsel, a copy of this call. I would ask to be able to publish the first portion of it. It states Exhibit 233A. I would ask to be able to publish the first portion for verification purposes.
All right, any objection to doing that?
No objection.
Very well, you can begin to publish it to authenticate it.
911, where's your emergency?
And hearing that, are you able to recognize your voice?
Yes.
And does that appear to be the start of the call from that day?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I would move for the admission of State's Exhibit 233A.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 233A is admitted and can be published in its entirety.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We're at 202 North, 1900 East.
What's going on?
We just found my mom. She's on the ground frozen, or she's stiff, and I don't know.
Are you in Madison County or Fremont County?
Well, I'm Chad, the husband. She's clearly dead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. Okay, are you in Rexburg or... Because your address shows Rexburg address, but you're in Fremont County?
Mile past.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, she's frozen.
Okay, can I get your name?
Chad Daybell. Oh, man. Oh.
Okay, Chad, I'm going to get somebody up to you right now, okay?
Yeah, the corner where the blinking yellow light is, the red house.
Yes, sir. Red house on the corner.
Yes.
Blinking yellow light.
Right.
Okay. We'll get somebody up to you, okay? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
If you need anything else, you call me back, okay?
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
And after hearing that call, is that the call in its entirety?
Yes, it is.
And was that a true and accurate depiction of the call that occurred that day?
Yes, it is.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Any cross-examination?
Ms. West, on this 911 call, someone identifying themselves as Chad Daybell asks for an ambulance or a coroner?
I believe he just asked for a coroner.
And do you typically send out an ambulance or just a coroner?
Wait, I want to go back. I don't think he asked for anything. He said that his house was on the corner. I think that's what it was.
Oh.
Sorry. I apologize. No, he did not say anything about an ambulance or a coroner. He said that his house was on the corner.
And I heard that, and I thought he asked for a coroner.
Okay, yes.
So if I misheard that, I'm sorry. He said his house is on the
He
corner.
said his house was on the corner. He did not ask for an ambulance or a coroner.
And so what did you send out there? Who did you send out there?
I sent my deputies, that is our protocol. We initially just send the deputies at that time, and then they advise if they need any other resources.
Okay. So your determination as a 911 dispatcher is not who to send out there. You just send out the police first.
Yes, depending on the call, yes.
And then it's the police who make the determination whether to bring an ambulance or the coroner.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is there any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Ms. West, on that call, Chad Daybell, I believe, indicates she's clearly dead.
Yes.
She's described as frozen or stiff or cold.
Yes.
Is that information relayed over radio traffic to a deputy?
Yes, it normally is. However, my deputy was sitting in dispatch at the time, so it was just verbally relayed to her.
And then the deputy may have determined whether or not to call out a coroner?
Yes.
There was no indication in the call that life-saving measures were being requested at that time?
Exactly. That is why I did not dispatch out an ambulance.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Blake. All right. I discussed, let me go ahead and just indicate that'll conclude your testimony. Thank you for appearing this morning.
And we would ask that Ms. West be excused at this time.
Okay. Is there any objection to that?
No objection.
Okay. You can be excused then. Thank you for coming, and the bailiff will help assist you out. We're going to go ahead and take our morning recess at this time, and then we'll have a second recess before we conclude. And so we'll try to make this one not be too long, hopefully 15 minutes or so if we could.
All right, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Let's please have the jurors brought in.
All right, please. Jury's out, President. Counter for Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record. Case CR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Noreen Vallow. We just concluded a morning break. We'd like to call or have the state call its next witness at this time. Who would that be?
Your Honor, the state will call Officer Allie Greenhalgh.
All right, now that the witness is sworn, let me just briefly inquire, because we have these simulcast locations and the audio's been released each day in this case. Have you listened to or reviewed in any way any of the trial testimony that's taken place thus far in this case?
I have not.
Okay, thank you for that response. When testifying, please make verbal responses to the questions and avoid talking at the same time as any attorney questioning you so we can keep a clear record. With that in mind, Ms. Blake, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Alyssa Greenhalgh, Alyssa, and the last name is Greenhalgh.
Where are you currently employed?
The Rexburg Police Department.
How long have you been employed with them?
A little over 2 years.
What is your current title or position?
Patrol officer.
Prior to working with Rexburg, did you hold another position as a law enforcement officer?
I did.
And where was that?
That was at the Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
Do you have any specialized training in order to be a peace officer?
I do. I've been through the Post Academy and I hold an intermediate patrol certificate.
Were you working in Fremont County for the Sheriff's Office on October 19th of 2019?
Yes.
Do you recall what shift you were working?
I believe I was a day shift officer.
How long had you been a police officer at that time?
Approximately 2 years.
Do you recall responding to the report of an unattended death?
Yes.
Where did you respond?
I responded to 202 North 1900 East in Salem.
Is that in Fremont County, Idaho?
It is.
Did you learn who the decedent was?
Yes.
Who was that?
Tammy Daybell.
Had you heard her name before?
I had not.
When you arrived on scene, who was present?
Chad Daybell and Garth Daybell were both present.
Did you make any observations when you first arrived?
Yes.
What were those?
Chad and Garth both met me in the living room. Chad seemed very distraught and was crying. Garth was a little bit more reserved and stayed pretty quiet.
When you respond, and I guess to back up, what is an unattended death?
An unattended death is basically somebody contacts police when they find either a stranger or usually their loved one or family member that they know is deceased.
And is it generally if someone is not under a physician's care?
That's correct.
Had you responded to other death scenes before?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many?
Approximately 5 to 10.
When you are dispatched out to an unattended death, are you conducting an investigation?
Yes.
Are you looking for specific things as a law enforcement officer?
Yes.
What are some of the things that you're looking for?
As a first responder officer, we're looking for obvious signs of foul play, like disturbances at the scene, broken furniture, things pushed around, or obvious injuries on the body, like gunshot wounds, stab wounds, things like that.
When you first responded into the residence, did you notice any signs of a disturbance?
I did not.
Did you notice any signs of a break-in?
No.
At some point, did you observe the body of Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
Who told you where she was located?
Chad did.
Did he lead you to the location of the body?
Yes, he did.
And where was her body located?
Her body was in their bedroom on the bed.
Were you advised whether or not her body had been moved prior to your arrival?
Yes, I was told that it had been moved.
And who told you that?
Chad.
When you respond out, do you obtain or request information from the individuals on scene?
I do.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
What did Chad tell you regarding the death of his wife?
He had told me she had woken up at approximately midnight with a coughing fit. She had vomited in the bedroom and then had gone into the bathroom down the hallway and had continued vomiting in the bathroom. He went into the bathroom to help her clean up and then had put her back to bed. They had both gone back to sleep. And then he said at about 5:40 a.m. he had felt the covers of the bed pull off of him and had looked over and noticed that Tammy had fallen off the bed, and he had told her to wake up, and when she didn't respond, he got up and turned the light on and saw that she had partially fallen off the bed and wasn't responsive.
And when you say partially fallen off the bed, did he give a description of how she was partially off the bed, which part of her body?
Yes, he described that her feet and legs had gotten caught in the sheets, so her feet were still up on the mattress, but her torso had fallen off the bed and her head was touching the floor.
And then he indicated that he and his son had moved the body back onto the bed?
That's correct.
Had they also covered the body up with blankets?
Yes.
And when you arrived on scene, is that the position you found her body in?
Yes.
When you arrived, was it apparent that Tammy was in fact deceased?
Yes.
Do you also request information from family members regarding a decedent's health?
I do.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
And did you request that information from Chad?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that Tammy didn't like to see the doctor. She had had kind of a cold. She had fallen in the driveway approximately a month prior and had received care for that. But other than that, she didn't have any major medical issues or injuries that he had told me about.
Do you recall if Chad said anything to you about Tammy having shaking fits?
No.
Did he indicate anything to you about Tammy going through menopause?
I believe so, yes.
And do you recall if he told you that affected how she slept?
Not that I recall.
Do you recall if he said anything to you about Tammy having fainting spells?
No, he did not.
Do you recall if he said anything about her blood pressure?
I believe he did tell me that she had issues with her blood pressure.
At some point while you were there, did anyone else respond to the scene?
Yes.
Who was that?
The deputy coroner and the coroner both responded.
And at some point, was a mortician called as well?
Yes.
As part of your job duties, do you make a determination whether or not to have an autopsy performed?
No.
As part of your investigation that day, did you reach out to some detectives?
I did.
Did you indicate to those detectives what you had noticed on scene?
Yes, I did.
At that time, had you made any observations of any suspicious activity?
No.
And were you basing part of your investigation in part on what Chad Daybell was relaying to you?
Yes.
Did Garth Daybell ever contradict his father while you were there?
No, he did not.
Did Garth Daybell offer any information to you?
No.
Did you end up taking photographs of the scene?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be shown States Exhibit 295A through L. These photos have previously been provided to defense counsel, and I have the official copy for the court as well. The original, and then if the witness can be shown this. And I believe Your Honor has been provided with a courtesy copy as well.
I have, thank you.
And Officer Greenalt, if you will look through those photos. Do those appear to be an accurate depiction of what you saw that day?
Yes,
And did you in fact take those photos?
I did.
I would move for the admission of States Exhibit 295A through L.
Any objection?
Your Honor, due to the graphic nature of the photos, they may be more prejudicial than probative, so I'd lodge that objection.
All right, do you want to make a response to that, Ms. Blake?
Your Honor, I would indicate that these are, the deputy or the officers indicated these are an accurate depiction of what she observed that day, and I think pursuant to case law, they are allowed to be shown.
All right, the court's considered the objection and also looking at whether under Rule 403 they should be excluded as being unnecessarily prejudicial. I do not find that they would be because they accurately depict the scene that the officer observed, and for that reason the objection's overruled, so exhibits 295A through L are admitted.
And Your Honor, I would ask for permission to publish those to the jury.
You can publish them, Ms. Blake.
And Your Honor, similar to the graphic photos of the children, the court took special precautions not to show those to the public. I don't know if the court wants to consider that as well.
Mr. Archibald, I did consider that. I was able to see these photos in advance just over the break and determine that I'll allow them to be displayed on the projector, even though they are graphic in nature.
Trying to make sure everyone else has the correct view. Officer Greenalch, what are we seeing in this photo?
This is a photo of taken from the entry of the bedroom of Tammy's body on the bed.
And that is in fact Tammy on the bed?
Yes.
And that is how you first located her?
Yes.
And in this next photo, what are we seeing there on the floor?
So there is a mat on the floor with a towel and then some clothing items from the closet.
At any point did you observe anyone do anything with that towel?
Not that I recall.
And what is this photo depicting?
This is another photo of Tammy's body on the bed.
While you were present, did you get closer to observe Tammy's body?
I did.
And when you did you make specific observations?
Yes.
What were some of those observations?
She had some pink reddish foam on her mouth that was running down her cheek.
And is that what we're seeing in this photo here?
It is.
In the prior deaths you'd responded to, had you ever seen pink foam on someone's mouth?
No.
Do you know if you'd ever responded to a death where the cause was determined to be asphyxiation?
Not to my knowledge.
And is that similar to what we're seeing in this photo as well?
Yes.
Was this just a zoomed in picture of that?
Yes.
While you were on scene before anyone else arrived, did you do anything to manipulate or move Tammy's body?
The only thing I did was check a pulse on her arm, but I didn't move her body in any way.
After others had arrived on scene, was Tammy's body moved?
Yes.
Is that done to assist with an assessment?
Yes.
Were you present while that was being done?
I was.
And is this a start of moving Tammy's body?
Yes.
Did you make any additional observations as you started this process?
I did.
And what were those?
As we moved the blanket down so that more of her body was visible, I did notice lividity on her back and legs.
And in this photo, are we again seeing that pink foam?
Yes.
I'm going to show States Exhibit 295J. In this photo, is this, again, a closer view of that pink foam?
Yes.
And at that time, was that one of the main observations that you had made with regard to Tammy's body?
It was.
Did you observe any bruising on Tammy's body?
Yes, she did have a small bruise on her arm.
And just by looking at that, were you able to determine how old or when that bruise would have been inflicted?
No, I was not.
Did you end up accompanying Tammy's body to the mortuary?
Yes.
Did you also take a photograph there?
I did.
And I'm going to show States Exhibit 295L. Is that an accurate depiction of the photo you took?
Yes.
And in this photo had the foam or the pink substance been removed from her face?
Yes, it had.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Any cross-examination?
So, officer, what time were you summoned to the scene?
Approximately 6 a.m.
And the report that Chad Daybell gave you was that at 5:40 a.m. is when he felt the covers pull off and she fell off the bed.
That's correct.
Okay. And so, do you know what time the 911 call was?
I don't.
But the time that you were notified to go there was about 6 a.m.?
Correct.
And so in talking to Chad about, did you ask him why the 20-minute difference between falling off the bed and the officer arriving, or when he called 911?
I didn't specifically ask him about that.
And so you arrived at about 6 a.m.?
Yes.
And it was apparent to you that she was already deceased?
Yes.
And that the Chad and Garth indicated they had picked the body up off the ground and put it back on the bed?
Yes.
Now, I don't know if this is part of your training and experience, but bodies don't move if they're already deceased, right?
Correct.
So for her to fall off the bed, she would have been alive at that point, right?
I assume so.
Okay. So sometime between 5:40 a.m. and 6 a.m. is that when you believe that she passed away?
I don't know that I'm qualified to make that determination.
Okay. But just by the time you got there, there was no point in calling for an ambulance?
Correct.
By the time you got there, there was no life-saving measure that could have been had?
Correct.
Do you know if CPR had been performed on Tammy between 5:40 a.m. and 6 a.m.?
To my knowledge, it was not performed.
All right. Thank you, officer.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Officer Greenelch, you were asked about a time of death for Tammy. Is that part of what you do with your job duties?
No.
Are you qualified to determine the time of death?
No.
Have you taken any medical training in order to be able to do that?
No.
You were asked about a dead person falling off the bed, and Chad saying that happened at about 5:40 a.m. Is that correct? Did Tammy, based on what observations you were able to make, did it appear Tammy had only been dead for 20 or 30 minutes when you arrived?
No, it appeared she had been dead much longer.
And why did it appear that way?
And I'll object if this witness isn't qualified to make time of death, and we're just guessing.
I will sustain that. I think it's speculative.
Based on your observations, was Tammy's body cold to the touch?
Yes.
Did you notice signs of lividity?
Yes.
Were you able to determine, or could you tell if there were signs of rigor mortis setting in?
I could not determine that.
One moment, Your Honor. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Blake. Ms. Greenhalgh, that'll conclude your testimony then. Can the witness be excused or released from subpoena?
Your Honor, the state would request you be released.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay. Thanks again for your testimony. The bailiff will assist you in exiting the courtroom, and the state, you can call your next witness.
The state will call Cammie Wilmore.
All right, now that this witness has been sworn, before we begin examination, let me just inquire, have you reviewed any of the trial testimony in this case, either by listening in at any remote broadcast location or reading it on the internet or listening into it on the internet?
I have not.
Okay, thank you for your response. As you're being questioned, please make verbal responses to any question asked so that we keep a clear record, and try to avoid speaking at the same time as anyone questioning you. With that in mind, Ms. Blake, you can commence with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Cammy, C-A-M-M-Y, Wilmore, W-I-L-L-M-O-R-E.
Where are you currently employed?
I am currently a Fremont County Advanced EMT, and also I am an administrative assistant at our seminary, the CES.
How long have you been an EMT?
At this point, about 14 years.
And as an EMT, are you trained in life-saving measures?
Yes.
And are you trained in responding to emergency medical situations?
Yes.
Prior to being employed as an EMT, did you work in the medical field?
Yes. I was a medical assistant for about 40 years.
Were you the deputy coroner for Fremont County in 2019?
Yes.
Do you recall when you were asked or when you became the deputy coroner?
I think it was February, March is when I started in 2019.
What are some of the duties of a deputy coroner?
I will go on calls when the coroner is not available or close to, I live in St. Anthony, so I would respond to ones in that area where she's up living farther away, and to go in and assess the body, pronounce time of death, try to gather information of why the person was deceased, medical history, that kind of thing.
And as a deputy coroner, do you respond out to unattended deaths?
Yes.
And what is an unattended death?
That's where they haven't been under, like on hospice or currently under a doctor's care, where somebody was not with them when they passed away. They were found deceased.
Had you responded out to scenes where someone ended up dying or was already dead as an EMT?
Yes.
And did you end up responding out to the report of an unattended death on October 19th of 2019?
Yes, I did.
Prior to responding out to that death, do you know approximately how many deaths you had responded out to in your capacity as a deputy coroner?
I was fairly new, so I think about 5. I had gone on a few training ones, but my own was about 5.
And out of those deaths that you've responded to as a deputy coroner, had you ever responded to a death which was determined to be caused by asphyxiation?
No.
When you responded out to the unattended death on October 19th of 2019, did you learn who the decedent was?
Yes.
And who was that?
Tammy Daybell.
Had you heard her name before?
I had not.
When you arrived on scene, who else was present?
Chad Daybell and officer from St. Anthony Alley. That's how I knew her.
And did you end up making any observations regarding Chad Daybell?
Yes, when I walked in, he was distraught, appropriately so, just saying that he found his wife dead, and I noticed that he was distraught.
Did you make any observations regarding Garth Daybell?
Not at that time. He wasn't in the room when I first came in.
Do you gather information from individuals on scene as part of looking into the unattended death?
Yes.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
Did you ask Chad Daybell about the circumstances surrounding the death of his wife?
Yes, I did.
What did he tell you?
He told me that about midnight that Tammy had gotten sick, coughing and gotten sick, and gone to the bathroom and was vomiting. And he went in there with her and then came back to bed. She was okay, came back to bed, said she was okay, and then they had gone to bed. And he proceeded to tell me that she was in menopause and that she liked to sleep with her leg outside of the bed. And he felt like that's what she had been doing that night, that her leg had been outside of the bed. And he said that they'd fallen asleep, and then later on he felt like he might have moved or rolled in the bed, and he heard her fall out of the bed. And he got up, and she was out of the bed with her head and body down, and like one leg twisted in the blankets, and she was cold and not breathing at that time.
And when you were asked to respond out, was there any indication as to whether or not an ambulance was being requested?
I did not think there was an ambulance coming because I was called by our coroner. She got the call, and then she called me and said, hey, can you go? You're 10 miles away. You can get there quicker than I can. And she said she would be coming.
And it was described to you as Tammy was already deceased?
Yes. That's what I thought I was going to, was a death, yes.
Did Chad indicate to you whether or not Tammy's body had been moved prior to your arrival?
Yes, he said that he'd gotten Garth, and that's the first time I had heard that. He'd gotten him to come in, and they had put her back on the bed. So she was not on the floor when I got there.
And did he describe how she'd fallen out of bed, if it was her whole body or part of it?
The leg thing, I think that was what he was trying to say to me about her leg hanging out, because he said that just one, I recall like a leg was twisted in the blanket so that she was, I pictured like hanging kind of with her head and part of her body on the ground. But I'm not positive that's what he meant.
But he didn't indicate the whole body had fallen out from your recollection?
Yes, I don't recall that.
Did you end up actually going in to observe the body?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, observe her body that day?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask to publish part of State's Exhibit 295 again.
You may do so. It's been admitted.
And for the court and counsel's benefit, I'm publishing 295C. Does that appear to be what you observed when you first arrived?
As much as I can remember, yes.
As part of your job as a deputy coroner, do you end up examining or looking at the body?
Yes, we do.
Do you recall if you made any specific observations regarding Tammy's body?
Yes, the first thing that has stuck with me the whole time is when I came in, she had this foam coming out of her mouth, quite a bit of foam. And I remember thinking that was odd. And she then, touching her and feeling her, that she was obviously had been deceased for a little while because she was very cold and she had the rigor set in. So that was my first impression.
And when you talk about rigor, could you describe a little bit what you mean by that?
The stiffness of the body. After a bit of time, different parts become stiff, and her legs were out, and so that showed to me that it had been a little while because they weren't just hanging limp like when you first pass away. Different parts of the body, and depending on temperature of the room and the condition of the person, there's different time frames, so can't really say exactly how long, but she had been I would say a few hours probably.
And do you recall approximately when you arrived on scene?
I got the call at 6 a.m., I remember, so I figured it was, maybe 35 minutes later, 6:35, 6:40, something like that.
And you would have estimated her to have been dead before 6 a.m.?
Yes.
And would you believe she would have been dead before 5:30 a.m.?
I would.
After those initial observations, did you observe anything else about the body that caught your attention?
I was looking, because you kind of want to look, she was 49, so I was like, this is unusual because she's not that old. So I was kind of looking for things like on her neck or bruising, scratches, those kind of things. And I observed just some bruising on a bicep. I think it was her right arm and forearm. But they didn't look new. They looked more like an older bruise. I didn't notice anything weird that way. I mean, maybe her color was normal for being deceased.
And with the bruises, did you do any additional testing to determine when those would have been inflicted?
No, not at that time. I did not do anything.
Did you notice anything regarding Tammy's face?
Besides the foam? No.
And when you talk about the foam, does that appear to be what you observed that day?
Yeah, and that's they get like a pink frothy foam, like a bleeding. That's what I assumed that to be, like some blood. There's some. I don't know if you.
Ms. Blake, for the record, what exhibit was just published?
I apologize, Your Honor. It is 295E.
Okay, thank you.
And you were saying with the pink foam?
Yeah, in my knowledge, I was thinking of things like congestive heart failure, something that I know that maybe could cause that with the pink frothing. And so my mind kind of went to that, and I was thinking that she's looking for things like swelling and things that would go with that, but I didn't see any other signs with that.
And did that pink foam, had you ever been to a death scene where you had seen that before?
I had not.
Did it cause you some concern?
It did. It caused me enough concern that I got my phone and I actually looked up poisoning, and I looked up foam from a dead person. I looked up poisoning just because I thought it was weird and I had not seen that before.
And with regard to her face, I asked if you'd noticed anything else. At any point, did you see any kind of an injury to her head that would be consistent with hitting a nightstand?
I did not.
At some point, did anyone else arrive on scene?
Yes, then Brenda Dye, our coroner, came on scene, and I was new, like I've said, and so I kind of deferred to her when she came in on scene.
And I guess I should ask, prior to her arrival, did you ask Chad about Tammy's health?
Yes, I did. I was trying to get a history. Had she been ill? Has anything happened? And he said that she'd had low blood pressure, hypotension, and she'd had a few little bits of feeling dizzy, lightheaded. And that was all he told me. He did say for the last month she acted like she hadn't felt well, maybe like a little clumsy. And so I began asking about like medications, because having worked in the medical field, I kind of can take a medication and relate it to an illness. And so I was asking about that, and she said that she didn't really go to a doctor much, and and I noticed right away on her nightstand there was like a homeopathic natural remedy book. And so I was like, oh, does she do this kind of thing for her health? And he said, yeah, she did the homeopathic type stuff. And so again, my mind kind of went to, oh, she maybe had something bad and didn't go to a doctor.
Did you end up looking at medications, whether herbal or over-the-counter or prescription?
Yes, that's part of our job. And I asked to see medications, and they took me out into another room, like the kitchen, off the living room kitchen area was a cupboard. And I looked, and there was herbs and vitamins and natural-type remedies in there. No medications that I could see to correspond with a medical illness that I was familiar with.
Did Chad indicate with regard to the fainting, or I think you said that she would kind of feel dizzy?
Lightheaded.
Lightheaded. Did he indicate if she'd seen a doctor for that?
He said no. Like, I asked him that specifically. Like, does she go to the doctor for any of that? And he said no, she didn't like to go to doctors.
And with regard to the indication of the low blood pressure, did he say whether or not that had been medically diagnosed?
No. No.
And when you're on scene at these unattended deaths, Do you have the benefit of reviewing medical charts or medical reports?
No.
Are you generally relying on information provided from family members with regard to health?
Yes.
And is that, in fact, what you did in this case?
Yes.
And that information was provided by Chad Daybell?
Yes.
And you said when the coroner arrived on scene, you were still present?
Yes.
At some point, was a further examination done of Tammy's body on scene?
Yes, I think Brenda did a little bit more. Well, there's two of us, and so I think I had gone out to look at medications. She was still in there talking. Now she's questioning him and talking and getting different, her report from it.
And when you say him, was that Chad Daybell?
Yeah, that was Chad Daybell.
And you said when Brenda arrived on scene, you deferred to her and
Yes.
she took over?
Yes.
As part of your job, do you end up determining whether or not an autopsy should be conducted?
As a deputy coroner, I would if I was the only one the coroner wasn't there. But as the coroner was there, that would not be my responsibility.
Were you involved in a conversation regarding whether or not to conduct an autopsy?
Yes.
And at the conclusion, was an autopsy requested at that time?
No.
Do you know if Chad Daybell requested to have an autopsy performed?
He did not want one. That was asked. Well, as we were discussing it, he was asked, and he said no.
Based on the observations you made at that time and the information provided to you, did you have concerns or questions regarding Tammy's death?
I did, and the two factors were her age and this foam.
Could there be a medical explanation, as far as you know, to explain the foam outside of some kind of foul play?
At that time, I didn't know of any. I have since looked. I looked up stuff just because I wanted to know. And there were some things that were mentioned, that I've read about, that there could be, I don't know if exactly like what I saw, but some foam.
At the time you responded out, do you also rely on external information if it's provided to you or if you know it?
Yes.
Had you ever heard the name J.J. Vallow?
I had not.
Had you ever heard the name Tylee Ryan?
No.
Had you heard the name Alex Cox?
No.
Had you heard the name Lori Vallow?
I had not.
Have you since heard of those names associated with Chad Daybell?
Yes.
If you had any of that information at the time, do you believe...
I'll object, Your Honor. We're speculating here.
Sustained.
One moment, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Blake. Cross-examination?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Wilmore. That'll conclude your testimony then for this trial. Is this witness to be released from any subpoena?
The state would request she be released, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay. That'll conclude your appearance at court then. The bailiff will assist you in leaving the courtroom. Thank you for your testimony today.